Guess we're recording. This has been an unusual weekend. I had a podcast to do yesterday, an episode, and an episode to do today, and both of them I don't really know what happened, to tell you the truth. Had my makeup on today. I was ready to go. I waited for a couple of hours, and, it was like radio silence. So I decided to break down. I went downstairs, took all my makeup off, took my contacts out, and was just going to cool down because I don't know if I should say I was angry or if I was just really hurt by what happened, but that's not what I want to talk about. I saw a meme on Facebook, or maybe it was on Instagram, and it stirred something in me that I don't really think I've told anyone ever. Okay, yeah, here it is. Let me turn the sound down so I don't get like a content copyright thing. All right, when I read this, I went downstairs to sort of calm down. I have sorry, you guys are probably going to see a lot of emotion today. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be inward, which a lot of my emotion tends to go inward anyway. But here we go. I'm going to tell you a story that sort of is what started off my adult life, and it was, well, we'll get into that. What made me think about it was this reel on Facebook. On Instagram. I've stood toe to toe with a man with pure rage in his eyes. When I say I'm not scared of you, trust me, I'm not. I think as a trauma survivor, as an abuse survivor, there are things, I'm 63 years old, and there are things that I'm still figuring out. And look at my body language. I'm closed off because what am I going to tell you? I think it's hard because I really don't think I've ever told anyone the entire story. There was a girl I went to high school with named Tanya Calhoun who ended up being like an attorney for the government in Washington. I wish I could find her because she saved my life. She saved my life. So what happened is Tanya and my best friend Connie from high school and we hung around all through school, and we were all pretty tight. Well, Connie and I ended up moving out and and I may have trouble looking at this just because this is a hard, like I said, it's a hard story to tell. But you know what? I'm going to tell it. I have protected people from it for too long, and I'm done. I'm done protecting people and holding things in. Maybe it'll bring some healing to me. Maybe it'll bring some healing to some of you. So Connie and I moved out when we were 18. Yeah, jump out of the house. It was one of those things. I've been listening to this book that I'd like to do an episode on. It's called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, which I really feel my mom was. And my dad wasn't neglectful, but he was not home. And he was pretty stern with us when we were kids. And it was a household, it was an environment that at the time, I didn't really know why I wanted to get out of it so badly, but I did. So Connie and I turned 18. We had graduated early, got an apartment, and that feeling that if you know me and have read any of the blog postings that I had up, or I may have sprinkled it out throughout some of these videos, I'm not really sure. I don't have any Kleenex up here in case I start to cry. I do have paper towels. So Connie and I, one night, went to a Willie Nelson concert at Billy Bob's in Fort Worth. If you guys know where that place is, you're living life right. We go to that concert. Like I said, I was 18. She and I were both 18. Went to the concert. Willie Nelson was amazing. It's hard to believe it was 40-something years ago, and he was younger than I am now. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy to think of. I had my camera, and this is before cell phones with cameras. It's like I don't know what I had, some stupid camera. I went up there and wanted to get a photo. This guy was next to me, and he asked if he could use my camera and get a photograph of Willie Nelson, because I mean, we were right up there close. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Well, I didn't realize that was a setup. We started seeing each other, and when I say seeing each other, I really don't mean seeing each other. It was a life jacket for me, because I knew at that point I couldn't go home. My relationship with my mother was horrible. It was, I love my mom. Don't get me wrong. I love my mother, but my relationship with her was absolutely horrible until I moved to the Northwest and things changed, blah, blah, blah. Whole other story. My dad was still flying at that time, and I knew, he wasn't going to be home. So I go with this guy that I just met. I'm 18 years old. He was, I can't remember how old he was. I think he was seems like he was 3 years younger than my mom, which would have made him that would have put him at, mom was born in 1941. So maybe he was born in 44 or 45, something like that. Significant age difference, especially for an 18-year-old that's out on her own for the very first time. I don't even remember how everything went. I remember we got married.
Sorry, I didn't get that. The internet isn't reachable.
Alexa's trying to talk to me. Alexa, be quiet.
Sorry, I didn't get that. The internet isn't reachable.
Sorry for her being so rude. Oh, gosh. Things keep coming to mind. We ended up getting married to appease my parents, mainly because I was out living with this person that was going to supposedly help me get on with my life. Although, I had gut checks. I had people come up to me time after time after time after time and say, you're not really thinking of marrying this guy, are you? It was weird because I was numb. I didn't even think about it. They would say that to me, and all I would think of was, I'm drowning. I'm absolutely drowning. So a lot of you that are or have been the victims of narcissistic abuse will recognize this. We got married, and 1 week later, I was told we were moving from Texas to Reno, Nevada. I knew really nothing about this person, except that's not true. That's not true. I knew that he was a criminal because he would come back to the apartment and he had pillowcases filled with jewelry and money and all of this stuff. Yeah, Terry, bad choices, really freaking bad choices. And that kind of shows you how badly somebody can mess your brain up. I'm trying to think, what is going to be the worst thing for me here? Staying with this freaking criminal, begging my parents to take me back in, which they wouldn't do, or becoming homeless, living on the streets. So I stay there. And we ended up packing up the car and moving to Reno. It was a car my dad had given me. Dude didn't even have a car. What the hell was I thinking? What was I thinking? This is so important. My parents never gave us any real world advice. Never. I saw my dad sleeping with this woman and this woman while my mom's at home working her butt off, taking care of 3 rambunctious kids, and she's locking herself in her bedroom. And my dad comes home and he's telling me, oh, guess who I hung out this, last month with? And I won't say the names of these women because they were very famous women. Anyway, I'm not angry with my parents because they did the best they could with what they knew. Neither one of them had role models growing up. And I don't know what my grandmother was like, my mother's mom, when she was growing up. But it seems like I've heard one of my aunts say that she wasn't that great of a mom, but she was like the stars and moon in my sky. She was everything to me. And my dad's mother was just a freaking Looney Tune. That's another story that's just, I feel bad for my dad and his siblings for everything that happened to them because of that woman. But we had no structure. We had no rules. We had no advice. Or I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for my brothers. No rules, no advice. no coaching on how life was supposed to work. So when you go into adulthood, which I don't think 18 years old is not really adulthood, what are you supposed to do? I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. My dad had told me already he wasn't going to pay for college for me. And I didn't find out until after my mother died why he wouldn't pay for college. And it was because the college that I had been accepted to, it was too much money. But Dad, I had a scholarship. So, I have a lot of, I love my parents. I love my parents. My dad was the best dad he could be. My mother made sure we were fed and we were clothed and we were okay. And I don't want to dwell on that. I guess what happened after. Okay, so I met this person. We're going from Texas to Reno, and we stopped in Vegas. That was a hard stop. He had 2 little kids, and the police were called to the room one night because I had been pretty heavily assaulted. I ended up in the hospital, and there was a social worker, and I'll never forget how, even at that time, being 18, how stupid I thought it was to have a social worker come in and talk to me with someone that had just clearly beaten the holy shit out of me, present in the room. It's like, no, nothing happened. Nothing happened. I fell. That's been my excuse for what? How old am I? I'm 63. That's been my excuse for what? 60 years. I fell. That happened in Las Vegas. It's like 2 or 3 days after the wedding, if you can call it a wedding. And then we ended up in Reno, Nevada. And I had never stayed in one of those little, like, by the week motels before. Oh my gosh, I just remembered something. We were staying at Bally's on the Strip in Vegas. That's why I have such a huge emotional reaction when I go by that place. I get panicked when I go by Bally's on the Strip. Oh, let's not hope those surprise memories don't come up. Anyway, back in Nevada, in Reno, in this dinky little pay by the week hotel, he ended up getting a job for the Lear company. Lear jets, those little Tinker toy jets. He got a company, he got a job with Lear with a falsified resume. So he was gone all day. I was in the motel with the kids all day. I take them to the pool. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have the car. I couldn't get around. It wasn't great. Then we ended up finding an apartment. We got into an apartment. And I remember he told me to fill out the application for the apartment. And so I did, and I filled it out truthfully. And I gave him the name of the apartment that we had been in before we moved. Whoa, I found out the hard way. The truth wasn't the best thing with people like this. He beat the holy crap out of me because I told him the truth, and we lost an apartment because I told them the truth. And they called the apartment and found out exactly how this weirdo had left the apartment. And sorry, guys, I have like walnuts in my teeth. If I skip around, forgive me, because like I said, this has been 43, 44 years ago. We did end up getting an apartment. He was working with Lear, and there was a company party that night, or one night. And I went and I had a goose egg about the size of a golf ball right in the front of my head from being kicked in the head. There was really nothing I could do with my hair because I had messed around with it so much. There was nothing I could do. It was just ruined. I pulled it back, and everybody saw my head. They saw the handprints on my arms. They saw fingerprints on my neck. And I remember just sitting there because I wasn't used to people that would ask if you were okay. My aunts always tried to make everything okay when I was with them when I was a kid, but that was not something that happened growing up. So it was deal with it. And back up again, in Vegas, I called my dad. I called my dad from Vegas and I said, Dad, I'm in the hospital. I think I had broken ribs and I can't remember everything that had happened. I told my dad what happened. I can still see that payphone I was standing in front of. And my dad said, sometimes things like that just happen. Whoa. Yeah. So then we'll go back to Reno. Sorry about the back and forth, but my memories are coming up weird. We went to that dinner with the coworkers, and it was very evident I had been beaten. Everyone was looking at me, but trying not to look at me, and I was trying not to make eye contact. And it went along like that for a while. Being beaten, thrown downstairs, kicked in the head, having a knife at my neck, having a gun at my head. I might have to bleep all these words. I'm just realizing on YouTube. How do I say that? Okay. You guys will figure it out. Having one of those things at my head and having it at my throat. It pretty much told me right then to sit down and shut up, because this is the way it was going to be. I had no idea what was going on. And as it happened, my friend that I'd gone to high school with, Tanya, lived in Sparks. She was going to school there. And, when I speak, I never use filler words. I can speak in front of 1,000 people and I will not use a filler word. But with me, I think this story is so difficult to pull out. And I'm so ashamed of what I allowed to happen to me that I'm having to really force this out of myself. So I apologize for that. And I'm sorry I've got my glasses on and no makeup. I guess hit my glasses off, which doesn't make anything much better because I can't see anything. But that went on for a while. And I had Tanya there. She would come and see me. We would go. I remember we went to some movie one night. None of that was the worst of what happened. None of it was the worst of what happened. In Reno, as in Vegas, there are bars. And there is, in casinos, I should say. There was one, I guess it's still there because I see it when we'd go to Street Vibrations on the motorcycle. It's called the Peppermill. And I was thrown this dress, and I was supposed to go sit at the bar and make sure I brought home money. I'm sure you guys can figure out exactly what I was expected to do. And I would sit at the bar and drink Cokes or water for however many hours before I went home. I knew what was going to happen. I knew it wasn't going to be good. But I also, at that point, knew there's no way I was going to do this other thing. That just wasn't going to happen. I guess in a way I had already done it because I'm living with this person that's beating the heck out of me just to survive. But that was a whole different level of low. And I guess, I should be proud of myself for refusing that part of the deal. So I was beaten quite regularly. And when there came a day that, man, I was smoking pot every day. I had never done that before. It was there. And I was in so much misery. I didn't know what to do. I just wanted to escape. Now, I felt that. If you watch some of my other podcast episodes or videos about, my trip to the behavioral unit, what happened, what set that off, the different things about what happened after my parents died and how I felt with the claws at my back. Okay, trauma just hijacked my brain. I don't remember what I was thinking. I was in survival mode, which had been in survival mode my entire life. I had been in fight or flight my entire life. I never knew where the other shoe was going to fall. Well, I was smoking pot. I was smoking pot to get away from everything that was going on. I had no idea. This was 40 years ago, 40 something years ago. So if there was something in it, it wouldn't have been much of anything. I just remember I needed a break from everything that was happening, from, thinking, watching the clock until he would come home from work and I would be hurt again. Another thing that he would do, when I remember him stopping by churches and trying to get money from them. And he used me and the little kids as sort of a sympathy card, I think, to get money or to get whatever. And then there was this whole, he got us on food stamps for some, I don't know how he got, but he knew his game. He knew what was going on. He knew how to play the system. He got food stamps, and what he did, he would take the food stamps and he would sell them to other people to get cash. I guess that's a thing. I didn't know that was a thing, but that's one of the things he would do. As I remember these different things, I'm going to try to tell as much of this story as I can while I have the guts to really do it. I guess I'm hiding behind my no makeup face. My makeup looked damn good today and yesterday, though. I had it spot on. So yeah, he did that to get cash. Then he started getting paid from Lear Corporation. Things that I saw, I never could understand how they would happen. I didn't understand why you would lie on an application for an apartment. I didn't understand why you would create a false resume to get a job. I didn't understand how you could beat the holy heck out of someone. I didn't understand how you could throw a dress at somebody, an 18-year-old, basically get out there and bring money home. I was in this like terror state. It was worse than when I was at home. At home, things weren't physical with me. It was just more emotional neglect and harsh words and things. But my parents never got physical with me. This was a whole new ballgame to me, and I was having to learn to survive. So there came a day when I went out to buy groceries. I had the two kids with me. We went out to buy groceries, and I passed out. I just went right down, and they helped me up, got me to the hospital. I found out I was pregnant. So I want you to tell me how messed up this is, okay? I found out I was pregnant, and I was determined to get my child out of that lifestyle back into what I considered a normal lifestyle, like with my parents. My friend called my parents because my parents were just, yeah, I was a mess. You don't let your 18-year-old out in the world. I guess you couldn't really stop them with absolutely zero skills, none. But it was better than being beaten every day, and I was not going to let my daughter grow up that way. My friend called my mom and my dad, and I called my mom, and she sent me a ticket to get home. My dad picked me up from the airport. No one spoke to me for several weeks. They did not say a word. Except for, okay, so this was interesting. When I took off, Tanya took me to the airport. We're sitting there. This is kind of a side story. We're sitting there, and there's this, you could smoke inside at that time. And I was just telling her, how I would get really nauseous, and I would get, and how cigarette smoke it made me sick. I had no idea there was a woman sitting behind me smoking a cigarette. Bless her heart, she got up and she moved away And I was so thankful that this stranger would do that for someone that she didn't even know. But I got on the plane, I got home, and one thing that did happen that my mother spoke to me about was, she said, "Did you empty out the bank account?" I said, "I have no money, Mother. I have no money. There was no money in the bank account. I have no money. I had no way to get in the bank account. They didn't have debit cards back then." And then she asked me if I called Child Protective Services on those boys. And I didn't. And I wish I had thought about it, but I didn't. Oh my gosh, those kids were so messed up. I didn't think about it. So the only thing I can think of is someone that he had worked with had seen how battered I had been and called Child Protective Services and took the kids. I don't know what happened to them after that. I don't know why he had them and the mother didn't have them. You know, when you're in survival mode, you don't really ask a lot of questions because any question can be a landmine. I can look back on it, being 63 years old, I can look back on it with two different perspectives. One saying, why the F did your parents not teach you about life or what to expect or how to live? I can look at it and I could say, girl, you were trying to survive and you had no idea how to survive. And I didn't. I had no idea. I couldn't even tread water at that point. So he knew I was pregnant and he came up with his name. He wanted to name the baby. And I'm like, yeah, I don't effing think that's going to happen because you're not going to effing ever see this kid. So how messed up. I said it before. I would get my pregnant self out of there knowing that I was going to have the baby, but I would have stayed in it. Wow, that says a lot right there. So I get home with my parents. They don't really speak to me except ask me if I had taken money out of the bank account, which I hadn't. I couldn't even get into the bank account. And if I had called CPS, and I wish I had thought of it because that would have been a very good thing to do, but I didn't have that life skill. I didn't have that knowledge at that point in time. I don't even know at that age if I knew what Child Protective Services were or was, because we were, kind of upper middle class. We didn't deal with people who had their kids taken away from them. I had no idea at that point about, I don't know. I should have. I don't know why I didn't. The only thing I think of is I didn't understand that they were there, maybe. So I would get phone call after phone call after phone call after phone call from him when I got back to my parents' house. And my mother always made me take the phone call. And, I had my mom, there was some physical stuff with my mom. She would get us with, or I should get me with Hot Wheel tracks or anything that she could get. So, I did have a little fear of my mother. I had a lot of fear of my mom before she and I developed a good relationship. I felt, when I look back at it now, I felt like the little puppy in the pound that nobody wants. I don't know if that's the right metaphor or not. That's how I felt. So these phone calls, I said, Mom, I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to talk to him. You're going to take the call. And I don't know why I didn't just hang up the freaking phone. Well, probably because I had been emotionally manipulated my entire life is why I didn't do that. You know what? I'll get back on track here, but I thought it was really interesting now I can't remember if this was after, it had to have been after my dad died, because I think it was after my dad died because my mother died the year before. And my brothers and I were there at the house, and it was the weirdest conversation because we didn't grow up as a family. We grew as individuals. We weren't I don't know if that makes sense. It wasn't like a bonded family. We didn't eat dinner with our parents. The only time we ate dinner with adults was when I was with my aunts, or when we had family dinners with my aunts. That was the only time. But the topic came up of who was the favorite child. And we all had a different notion of who the favorite child was. I can remember my middle brother, or the brother, he's the middle child, was really, I really remember a lot of my mother taking really good care of him. But then she also would take my younger brother and do things. So I didn't think I was. One of them thought I was, the other one thought someone else was. None of us knew, but we all had this different view of our childhood that was, it was really kind of eye-opening. Like, I mean, what the heck, a favorite child? But I guess when you grow up in a house like I did, you kind of think that way. So this guy's calling me every freaking day. And I had found out that, well, oh my gosh, this is something I had to deal with when I got back. When we got married, he took me down and opened a bank account. I'd never had a bank account. And this was in Irving, I think is where we were. And he would have me write a check, go buy groceries, write a check. He would call and say, I put so much money in the bank, go buy groceries, do this, do this. He never put money in the bank. All those checks were freaking hot. And then when we got to Reno, I wasn't even allowed on the account. So when I got back to Texas, I had to deal with those checks. And I had an attorney that was my mom's cousin's brother-in-law who got me out of that mess. And, my parents are looking at me like, how stupid are you? Well, yeah, how stupid was I? I didn't know what the heck to do. What do you do? Your parents do what they do to you, and then this stranger does what he does? And you do what you have to do to freaking survive? So, oh, God. I did end up finding out from that attorney that because I was determined that man's name would not be on my child's birth certificate. He was evil. He was a sociopath. He was a freaking psychopath. He had absolutely no empathy. He had no conscience, none. And I found out I didn't have to put his name on the birth certificate, and so I didn't. And I remember having to fight with a nurse. She said, well, we have to put a name here. I said, no, you don't. My attorney has told me that I don't have to name a father. Yes, well, she was so freaked out. She was coming into my room back and forth after my daughter was born. And I did stand up for my daughter. I wouldn't stand up for myself, but I stood up for my daughter because this guy would have made her life a living hell like he did those boys. She was not going to be connected to this monster in any way. So then there was, one of my brothers one day, and I can't remember if this guy showed up at the house or if my brother just thought that he showed up at the house. But someone had come to the house, and my youngest brother was out there with a shotgun. He was ready to take him out. So they were being really protective over me. They knew at that point, my brothers knew what had been going on. So I just remember my brother with the shotgun. I think it was after the baby was born. I can't be for sure, but he would call me in the hospital too. And I didn't realize, here I am, 18 years old. I guess I was 19 when she was born, that you could tell the hospital not to give you any phone calls. The calls were relentless. Before she was born, after she was born, all sorts of threats. It's like, you don't have any standing, dude. The state went after him for child support, and he would change his social security number. That was another trick that, it's like, how sheltered was I? How naive was I? Or how afraid was I to do things that this person told me to do. Yeah, fill this out, but just don't use your correct social security number. Okay, yeah, okay, you can call me dumb. I could call myself naive. I could call myself beaten down and in fight or flight, not knowing what the heck was going to happen to me. So yeah, it was a big cluster. The whole thing was just a freaking mess. But I was able to get away from the daily beatings. I was able to get away from being pimped out or trying to be pimped out in casinos. I was able to I got back, focus on my daughter. When I got pregnant with her, I started having horrible morning sickness. And I went to this doctor in Reno and he put me on this medication. I think it was called Bendictin, something like that, because I had horrible morning sickness. It was so bad. And when I got to Texas and found a doctor, he took me off of it and he said, this causes birth defects. Do not take it. He said, since you're out of that situation, you're going to start feeling a little bit better. And I did. I started feeling a lot better. But my daughter suffered the consequences of that medication and has intestinal birth defects. And a lot of, oh my gosh, it was just a lot of things. I always, even though I knew it wasn't my fault, I always felt it was my fault. All I was doing what the doctors told me to do. And when we found out her birth defects and that this medication had likely caused it, we also found out that there was a ban on any lawsuits against this company, which was absolutely total BS because my daughter was messed up internally. Beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful, big green eyes, beautiful blonde curly hair. She was such a delightful little girl, and she kept asking if she kept having tummy aches, and we didn't know what they were, but it was her intestines. And I'll never forget, I would sit there and I would wonder, what am I going to tell her about this sperm donor? One day she's going to ask me, what do I do? How do I protect my child? Do I tell her that he was killed in a car wreck? Do I make him look like some kind of a hero so she doesn't have to know he's a freaking sociopath and take that on and think, wow, if he was like that, am I going to be like that? So I didn't know what to do. I'm thinking about it for probably 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years maybe. I can't remember how old she was when she came up to me and she said, Mommy, I was in my mother's kitchen. Mommy, what happened to my mean dad? I don't know what I said. I don't know where she even heard that because it didn't come from my lips. I don't know if it came from my brothers. I don't know if it came from my mom or my dad. I don't know how she even found out about that. One really sweet thing that happened though is after she was born, she was so precious. I remember thinking she was the most beautiful child I had ever seen. I think every mom, you've got your baby eyes on, and you think your kid's the most beautiful baby ever, until you look back at the pictures several years later and you're like, oh, holy crap, what was I thinking? The kid, she was such a sweet baby. She was a really good baby. And one of the things I remember the most, I remember her fingernails. That's one of the first things that I noticed, how perfect her fingernails were. I brought her home from the hospital. No, before I brought her home from the hospital, this is when they actually let you have real balloons at the hospital. My mom and my aunt sent me this big balloon bouquet for her. And it just made me cry. And my aunt would come over and she would take me to garage sales and we'd look at baby clothes. And, she really, and I had forgotten about that until just now, how she really took care of me. I think she saw that my mother didn't have the capacity to give me what I needed. And she stepped in, never saying a foul word about my mother, never saying anything about my mom. And then my mother's cousin's wife, when I was pregnant, she would come and get me and take me to movies. And I would go spend time at her house. She had adopted a baby and then she got pregnant with a baby. Weird, I'm just going down these rabbit holes. I'm sorry, but I don't know what to say except thank God that's in my past. But is it really in my past? I deal with it every day. It's not just that. It's all the generational trauma. It's the trauma from since the day I was freaking born. And my mom telling me she's going to put me in the trash can in the alley so the guys would take me away and they didn't speak English. She's telling me this stuff. How is a 3-year-old supposed to cope with that? That goes into your brain. It goes into your brain. That forms who you are. And both of my aunts told me they both saw what was going on, but they were powerless to stop it, which they were. What could they do? They couldn't do anything. They couldn't do anything. My dad was gone all the time. He didn't realize that my mother, at that point in my life, was non-emotional, went to her room and shut her door, locked the door, had nothing to do with me or I can't say my brothers because I don't know that. She had nothing to do with me. There was absolutely no connection on a parental child level, on an adult to adult level, on a grandmother to, well, there was a huge, she really connected with my daughter. And she paid for daycare so I could go to work. And I remember my paychecks, I would buy things for my daughter, I'd buy her little clothes and stuff. But I don't know why even that meme, that thing on Facebook, it brought all of that, or Instagram, that brought everything back into the forefront. And here I am, angry. Oh my gosh, I was so angry today. I could have thrown my computer. I wasted 2 flipping days. And I need to just stop because maybe it was supposed to happen for me to see that meme and to put this out there, because these are stories I've never told anyone. I think I've told bits and pieces to people, but I've never told the whole story. I have a lot of those that I've told bits and pieces to, but never told the whole story. Or I've told the story, but in a completely different way than it happened, because what happened was so abhorrent and so violent and so ugly that this lie that I told seemed like a better alternative than what I really allowed my parents to do to me. What the heck? I mean, chimpanzees take better care of their kids than humans do. My dad was flying all the time. He was always gone. He was gone about 27, 28 months a year. He had a thing for my, well, some singers. We'll leave it at that. And he had a thing for my grandmother's, a friend of my grandmother's. Her name was Carmen. She was beautiful. But I remember he asked me one day, what would you think if Carmen was your stepmom? Who does that? Who freaking does that? And the betrayal, I mean, that's putting me in between my mom and my dad. And I'm looking at my mom. She didn't know what's going on. I never heard my parents fight. I never heard them fight until one night. And actually, I spoke with a woman, one of my really good friends from childhood. I met up with her a couple of years ago in Arlington, where I grew up. And then the next year, I drove down to California, and then I drove to see her mom, and she and her husband were there. And so we all met up and we were talking, and we were talking about the neighborhood, what a great neighborhood we grew up in, which it was really, that little neighborhood where my parents started off was really a great neighborhood for kids. And I said something, yeah, it was such an awesome neighborhood with the playground and the tennis courts and the swimming pool, and until we had to move because of the neighbor. And instead of asking, what do you mean? When I looked at my friend's mom, she knew. My mom had gone to her crying. And that was really comforting to me to hear that my mom had someone, because my mom was very closed off, very emotionally closed off. She wouldn't have anything really to do with her sisters. Something happened, because there was one point when I remember she was like really all about her sisters, and then something had to have happened at some point when she really pulled away from them. But knowing that this woman was there for my mother, when my mother was never there for me, ever, meant so much to me. Because I was probably 62 at that point. I think it was last year. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I had already been through therapy, extensive therapy, since 2011. I mean, weekly extensive therapy to get over all the messed up stuff in my childhood. And hey, if you're still with me, subscribers, give me a comment, something, because I'm just freaking rambling right now. And I'm really hoping that anyone out there that has anything similar will be able to see that you can make it. You know, you can make it. I went through some horrible stuff from not being taught. You know, the things I think we were taught were, don't speak when your dad's home. We had to ask to be able to sit with my dad. Dad would make toys for us, and he would really, when he was home, he really made the effort to be a good dad. But then my mom was on the other, it was like a very triangulated family. You know, it's the kids versus my mom and my dad. What the heck? What's he supposed to do? So it was messed up. When this woman told me that she was there for my mother and that my mom would just go over there and cry and tell her what was going on, I just had this enormous wave of compassion for my mom. Because to think of all the trauma my mother had to have gone through to treat me the way she did, to not give me the skills that I needed as an adult, to stop me from going to a college that I had a damn scholarship for. And I didn't find out until she died. Dad said, well, I couldn't afford the rest of the college. What the heck do you mean you couldn't afford the rest of the college, Dad? You were making bank as a private pilot to these rock stars and oil men. You were making freaking bank, and you can't pay for SMU? Even if I didn't have a damn scholarship, you couldn't pay for it? You couldn't have helped me get loans? What the heck? But I see you're putting my brothers through school. A little angry, Terry? I don't know. I guess this is pretty good. Get this off because my therapist doesn't have to listen to it tomorrow. You know, sometimes I think I need to stop therapy. And then there are other times that things come up, like this weekend. I really felt hurt by things that happened this weekend. I needed to be able to take my mind off of things. I don't know if any of you are, you know, I don't drink. I have had, yeah, it's not like I've never been an alcoholic. I've never been addicted to pills. I've never done any of that. Oh, wait, let me take it back. There was a time when I was doing some things I shouldn't have been doing, when all the world was crashing in on me and my parents had died and my world just went to shit. I was drinking a bottle of wine a night, and I can remember some of the kids saying, oh my gosh, I'd never seen mom like this. That snapped me out of it, because I can remember my dad at 10 o'clock in the morning pouring himself a glass of straight vodka. And I stopped that shit then. I just wasn't going to do it. I found other ways of escape that were really, I don't know if any of them were less healthy or more healthy than the other. They were bad. They were all bad. But you know what? I made it through. I made it through because of, I had a lot of support in my family. Not with my parents. I mean, my parents had already died, but I did have a lot of familial support. had great doctors. I had some really good friends. I tell you what, times like that, you find out who your friends are, who your real friends are, and who scatter. And the ones that scattered, I don't know if they realize that that was so telling on what happened. Here, I was just almost dying, literally, and people just left. And then there was the problem of there was someone in the family that had moved out, and then they were lying about something to my family. It's drama, and I've taken myself out of that. But this was an instance that for some reason, I don't know if there's someone out there that needed to hear this, but I just felt really compelled to tell that part of my story because I don't think I've left anything out. It was a pretty traumatic time. I'm really surprised that I survived it. Oh my gosh, the beatings were horrible. You know, to survive something like that, I don't think I would have survived it had I not been pregnant. But I fought for my child's life. I don't know what else to say, except I'm sorry I don't have any makeup on. I look horrible. Yeah, I waited a day for quite a while. And I had, an episode set up, and it's like, this just isn't going to happen. Went down, took my makeup off when it was just looking good too. I should have left it on a little bit longer, but I don't know. Maybe makeup free makes it a little bit more transparent. I don't know. I don't know how to end this. I don't know what to say. If you're a parent that's put your kids through hell or not taught them what to do, you need to freaking make up. You need to tell them you're sorry. I forgave my parents a long time ago. It's so funny. I was at church one day when Michael was a baby, and this woman came up to me and said, "We're starting an adult children of alcoholics class when we thought you might want to join." I'm like, looking at him, like, how did you know my dad's an alcoholic? My mother really didn't drink, but my dad was a full-on alcoholic, but he would not drink however many hours before he was supposed to fly. So I went to this class, and it was really one of the best things that ever happened to me, because in that class, it allowed me to have all the anger that I had pent up towards my parents. It let me have that anger, and it let me get rid of it, and it let me see my parents as two broken individuals who did not have a roadmap on how to raise kids. They had no idea. They did the best they could. My mother kept us dressed. She kept us fed. It may have been canned food, but my mom kept us dressed, fed, and the pictures I've been seeing that kind of crop up, she kept my hair done. She was a good enough. She kept me alive physically. Emotionally, I pretty much died, but physically, she kept me alive. And then my dad kind of counterbalanced that when he was home. But wow, I think about that, and it's like, all the different things in my life. People tell me you need to write a book, and how do you write a book when you're telling your story to a therapist and they're looking at you like, what the F are you talking about? I have never seen anyone go through the things that you've gone through. Well, you know what? I haven't either, but I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm better every day. And I can thank God that I can look back and say, you know what? I made it. When I moved to the Northwest, my mom and I had a relationship. It was surface level, but we had a relationship. Still didn't, my mom was always the conduit for my dad because he was either out of town or flying, and we couldn't get a hold of him. So all information from all parties passed through my mother. She was like the hub of information. When my mom died, even though it was so tragic and so horrible that she died and the way she died, that how can you find anything good in a situation like that? Well, my brothers and I stepped in to take care of our dad. And I was down there 2 to 3 weeks a month for the next 13 or 14 months. She died July 3rd of 2006, and Dad died. They put that he died September 14th, but he died on September 13th, but they found him the next day of 2007. See, there's my trauma hijack again. I have no idea what I was talking about a minute ago with my mom and dad. I'm so glad though, after all the trauma, and when I fell apart spectacularly in front of the entire world. I went down in flames. I let everyone down. The only thing I could think of was I needed to either live or I needed to die. There was no in between. And I'm glad I lived. I owe my life to my grandson. I don't think he even knows that. Someday I'll have to tell you that story. But yeah, I lived. I went through so many misdiagnoses and so many. This is when Obamacare started, when all this, and that just effed up the entire medical system here in the United States. Psychiatrists and therapists were jumping ship left and right. I can't even remember how many therapists I had from 2008 to 2011 before I found my psychiatrist that I kept until he retired last year. And I still have the same therapist that I had. I met them kind of like at the same time. So I've had them since 2011. That's a pretty good run. And they were with me. And if it wasn't for them, I couldn't have made it. But you know what? My tattoos tell my story. People look at me, I came to realize that, and it's in one of my tattoo trauma episodes. If you want to, I'll link that in the notes here. But my tattoo trauma, I noticed that my black and gray tattoos are trauma tattoos. I would call Jason and say, hey, Jason, I need therapy. And he'd like, hey, beautiful, come on in. I'll find some room for you. And he would work on me. And then my color tattoos are for my grandchildren. And that's when I was feeling more joyous. And it's really weird to look at my body and see that I have an entire story on it. And I don't care. I like the comments that I get. It's really funny because I'll dress really nicely, really well. And, I have the comments I get the most are, I love your style. And I think they put my clothes together and they see my tattoos, and in their mind, they don't go together. But they've come up to form a cohesive person, which is me, who is now rambling because I'm playing with a freaking bottle of eye drops. So I'm going to say thank you for listening because it was a bad day. It was a really bad day today. I thought days like that were over, but that's when I have to rely on the skills that I've learned and realize how special people are to me no matter, what happens. They still have a very valid, very special part in my life. Because my gosh, if I was to judge people, you might as well shoot me right now. After everything that I've been through, everything I've done, I don't have any judgment for anyone, but it's made out like that. Anyway, guys, I want to thank you for listening to my therapy session. I guess I should pay you all my copay, or those of you who are still here till the end. What a freaking weekend. Oh my gosh. It was just, I was so excited for all this to come through, and then it just didn't. And to be someone who has been put off by your own family, and to have it happen in a situation where you absolutely love someone completely to death, and they forget about your appointments, it hurts. It hurts. But that's life. And I don't hold anything against anyone. Okay, well, I guess it's better. It's time for me to. It's 5:23 Pacific Standard Time for Pacific Daylight Time. I have not eaten in 2 days, so I guess I should go to get something to eat. I at least get hydrated. I don't need, more problems with my blood pressure, and I have a procedure coming up on Thursday that I've got to get ready for. It's going to be pretty dramatic, so I know you're not going to see me after that until I'm completely healed, because it's going to be a really heavy duty procedure. So anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate every one of you. And if you're in trauma, reach out to someone, because there is someone that will listen to you. There is someone that cares. There are people that have been in your shoes. And I hope you can resonate with something that I've said, and it makes you realize that you are not alone in this world. You are not alone. With this procedure coming up Thursday, it might put me out of action for a little bit, but we'll see. All right. Signing off here, guys, and thank you so much for bearing with me rambling and with no makeup. I appreciate it. Thank you.